Okay, well, if everybody's ready, we'll go ahead and start. Welcome to everybody for your presence here today. As we call this meeting to order, I will do the roll call. John Browning, absent. Wayne McLean, here. Hugh Rawls, absent. Melissa Miller. Ken Johnson, here. Dana Jones.
Present.
All right, thank you very much. I think the next thing on the agenda is to approve the minutes from June 1, 2022.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Do we have it? Second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye, motion carried. Thank you. And I had just a few opening comments, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Holmes and city staff and our city commission. Thank you for a wonderful welcome, Mr. Rawls. You can oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's so kind. Thank you for a wonderful 4th of July celebration. It was truly a magnificent performance, wonderful holiday. And as we remember that great day in 1776, when the Patriots pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor, I was reminded of the speech of Thomas Paine just 15 months before that. And I'd like to just read a paragraph of that. It said, "The war has actually begun. The next gale that sweeps from the north will bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand we here idle? What is it that the gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what other course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death." And I thought about these words this morning as I was thinking about our meeting today and thinking of the wonderful aviation benefits and all of our benefits that freedom has brought us. Freedom has allowed us to flourish. And in flourishing, when we think of the world of aviation, I was reminded that in December 1903, we had our first flight at 3 miles an hour. And 59 and a half years later, the SR-71 set the world record at 2,103 miles an hour. And that is all in 60 years. And that's what we're here to work on today, is this world of aviation, that we see how wonderful freedom has made us flourish and brought us such wonderful things. Those are my opening comments, but thank you again for the wonderful holiday. Next on the agenda is public comments. Do we have any public comments at this time? All right, there being none, we'll go to number 4. And we turn this over to Mr. Ewell. Thank you, sir, for all that you're doing. And you might want to introduce formally your guest too, if you feel so at this time.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Members, good to be back with you. It is my pleasure to introduce a young man that connected with me probably on my first week on the job. I've said many times that the one thing that appealed to me was the courage that a young man would have to come to a total stranger and express his interest in a business that I have a passion for. So James Keeley, he'll be going into his senior year at Palatka High School. And, we've kind of unofficially adopted him at the airport. We really look forward to working with him, giving him a little insight to what we do, and just give him a different scene. As he stated earlier, he's been around, he's been flying quite a bit. And for a 16-year-old to accumulate, that number of hours and have the discipline and motivation to do it is very impressive as well. We have been enjoying his presence there and, look forward to really planting some seeds, not just for the airport, but also for the community. These guys are the future, and, this is what it's about. So that's what we are, and welcome aboard, and, look forward to working with you. Yeah.
Is there any comments from the board for this young man?
Glad to have you, young man.
I started as, I started at 16 years old and cleaning up airplanes and things like that. And I'll tell you what, there's just something about flying, you know, that if you don't know how, you just don't know. So you know, and so we're praying for you and we hope you the best.
7 years.
I like that. So any other comments? Thank you very much, sir, for being part of our team.
Okay, so the last meeting, we left off halfway between the presentation regarding the leasing policy. Today's objective is to get through the leasing policy. Now that now that I've gotten schooled a little bit on blocks of time and those kind of things. So I would like to fast forward on the screen to section 3, which covers lease rates, terms, and provision. Great, perfect. So if I may, so we talked about the guiding principles of any agreement that we're going to establish at the airport. And I should be more specific, long-term agreement. You know, now the month-to-month agreements that we currently have, they include some of the standard language, but certainly when you get into comprehensive 20, 25-year deals, you're going to want to make sure that's specific. So this will really apply to that. So there's 3 key points in this section here: lease rates, terms, provisions. Lease rates focus on, okay, how are we going to develop our lease rates for these opportunities? I think it was mentioned at the last section that, you know, wonder if somebody decide to come in and we stroke the dollar, you know, for the improvements and lease it back to them. We'll still take the same approach. You know, there's about 3 ways that we're going to look at. One, we're going to look at comparables. We're going to look at appraisals, not just new appraisals, because, you know, you look at the industry, a lot of times, you know, if you have an appraisal 3 to 5 years recent, you know, they're able to use that and be consistent with the market. So the lease rate itself, which will be a ground lease for the most part. Sorry, my phone never rings. So, you know, so these would typically be ground leases. You know, a company approach us, say, I want 50 acres, I want to do a logistics center. You know, we're going to come back to them with rates based upon one of those 3 components. Terms, you know, similar approach. You know, the terms will be based upon some factors. You know, we can't and we shouldn't give people 50-year deals and you're only dropping $1.5 million in investment. You know, we have to be realistic about some of the leases. And one of the key pieces that we will rely on is the comps. There's a lot of other peer airports out there in Northeast Florida and Central Florida that are doing developments. You know, we have a pretty good gauge on how some of those opportunities look. Obviously, there's going to be some out there that's a little bit of a stretch. I reference the basic business term of one. It was 1.5 million. I think it was 30 years. But to me, I think that's a little bit thin for us. You can't tie up your property for 1.5 million. And typically those level of investments are typically driven by the amortization rate, and 1.5 over 30 some years, that's beneficial to the borrower of those dollars. So, you know, again, we will rely on comparables, and I want to share it with you, just kind of give you an idea of how we will approach this. The term also is going to be based upon the economic impact. You know, some companies may come in here and say, okay, well, I'm gonna have 10 employees and I want 35 years. Others may come in and say, well, I'm gonna bring in, 100 employees and I want 20 years. You know, if these companies are coming here providing employees with wages that are higher than the average wage in Putnam County, in this region, those are some of the flexibilities that we as a city should have to take in consideration. So the term is not necessarily cookie cutter, but if some of these larger operations come in where they are going to generate jobs for the community, if they're going to expend high levels of capital in our community, those, and part of this policy is to reserve your ability as a city to do just that. I call them flexibilities, having that flexibility. Last but certainly not least on this particular session is the provisions. Would you scroll a couple? I know I've kind of ran down the road on you a little bit. Back. One more. Down. Yep. Right there. So we talk about provisions. These are the standard language components that you're gonna find in our long-term deals. And these are industry standards. I'll lay out a couple of them for you. Title of improvements. So you sign a 20-year deal. At the end of that deal, all those improvements revert back to the city. Okay, that's standard language. It's not tear your building down, put it on the truck and you leave with it. It's all these improvements revert back to us. Assignment, subletting, we remain having that control, because many times you see people come in, build a facility, turn around and behind your back lease it to someone that's probably the one in the first place. And the reason I'm using the assignment and subletting piece is because what I found in my time of being in this industry, you need to know who you're dealing with, and you need to know what they're about. And if you don't, there are nightmare stories out there that you're going to be tied to. And I think that's critical, and that's important for us to reserve that right. In terms of encumbrances, it's typical for someone to get in a deal and want to come back and whether they finance it up front or they want to refinance it down the road. That's fine. But at the end of the day, that's only going to apply to their improvements during that term. We're not going to encumber our property, our land, and looking through best practices in other peer airports, it's just fairly standard, but you probably won't have many folks, if you're looking at the larger operators or potential customers, to be requesting something like this. But even with this, we reserve the right to control that. If the leadership in the community want to do it, that's their decision. Scroll down, please. And the next one here is probably one of the more important ones that I think a lot of people overlook at times, and that's holding the city harmless. All our agreements should have that in them. So, you ask the question, how that plays out. Well, a lot of times folks want you to protect them. Well, it's our facilities, it's our property, they are responsible for their own actions, and they are going to protect us. We are the landowners. So, and we need that degree of protection. Every single agreement, whether it's a month-to-month agreement, whether it's a one-year agreement, whether it's a long-term agreement, we need to include that as standard. And this language is standard, in terms of the industry. It's part of the best practices. Design standards are driven by us. We have some pretty strong standards, and it keeps us consistent with what we're trying to do here in the community. Scroll down. Okay, so this section, I'm a high point the performance bonds and zoning and the dominant agreements. So performance bonds, I believe this is certainly one of my top two in an agreement, because someone comes in, develop a facility on our property, defaults in the deal. And if you don't have a basic performance bond that may be, X amount of rent, we're exposing ourselves to more problems. I found that bigger deal, long-term deals need to have some kind of protection. The folks may come in, damage the property. If you don't have some kind of bond or financial access source, again, you're gonna find yourself in a problem. It should be standard. Performance bonds for month-to-month agreements, I can go either way with them. But from a policy standpoint, if we're getting involved in these complex deals, we need to have some protection in place for it. Dominant agreements, the very last one there is also critical, because everyone dealing with the airport here needs to understand that there are some agreements that supersede the relationship that we may have in place. Those relationships with the FAA, FDOT, supersedes any agreement we have in place. Standard language. However, you'll be surprised, some people are not aware of those dominant agreements. So what I'm sharing with you here is some provisions that we believe should be part of our basic standard language in our agreements. Now, once all of the details are cleaned up, determined, let's talk about the process. So this is the most important aspect once you have a business deal or an opportunity that you want to evaluate. So I laid out this process, and the objective of the process was to lay out a clear path for the airport to walk and process a business opportunity. A lot of times these may come through the city manager's office, different places, but at the end of the day, from a effective process standpoint, this is ideal for us because it helped us to focus and hit each step, because each step is critical. First step is obviously getting an opportunity. Next step is going through the due diligence process of things. The due diligence process is going to be a little sensitive because some people, some companies want some degree of discretion. When you're coming in, spending large amounts of dollars wanting to develop property, they don't want it to be a public item. So a lot of them are going to fold it under the confidentiality aspect of it. But those due diligence, that's engaging, the advisory board, city manager, the leadership, the airport manager here would be really digging into who's who and what's what. Hey, this is what we're working with here. These are the folks that are trying to do business with us. Once we get to a point of, hey, this is realistic, we are ready to go down the road and we've come up with some kind of idea about term, the business deal. There's a couple of key questions that we'll have to ask ourselves. One, is it aeronautical or non-aeronautical? If it's non-aeronautical, it should run through FDOT or FAA. If you're going to try to do non-aeronautical on airport. If it's a long-term deal, the suggestion is to run it through FDOT or FAA as our standard practice. Even though as an airport professional, I know that the general rule is it's 99 years. Well, I can assure you there's not many 99-year deals out there. These big deals around here are much less than that. So, but the practice and the process of going through, FDOT and FAA would bode well for us to stay consistent with their guidelines. Now, there may be some that may be a little shorter in term. If there's uniqueness to them, out of abundance of caution, I would suggest at least running it by our partners at FDOT FAA, working with our consultants, you know, to kind of make sure that we don't get any surprises down the road. But after we take it through that process, the ultimate goal is getting to the point of saying, hey, we're ready to go before the commission, the leadership, and say, here's a business deal that we feel comfortable about. We know who this is, we know what it's about, we know the impacts of it, you know, and how this is going to positively, you know, affect our community. You know, that's the next step. Keeping our fingers crossed, we get past the commission, we transition over to getting the legal documentation in place, working with the city attorney, city manager, and others, just basically formalizing the documents. And last, certainly not least, is executing the agreement, getting into the ribbon cutting phase of things, and transition over to tenant management, contract management. So, you know, this process, the turnaround time processes vary. You know, I'm looking at 6 to 8 weeks. You know, it may be sooner, it may be a little longer, depending upon the uniqueness of the project. If it's a straightforward project, company want to come in here and house their Challenger 350 at the airport, and they want to build their own facility, that's fairly straightforward. Company come in here, wants to set up a logistics facility, and some of this stuff is non-aeronautical and some of it is aeronautical. That's maybe a little problematic. That's going to take some time to kind of work through the due diligence of it. So this step here is the last component of the business deal of things. You know, how we're going to look at developing our agreements. What is the process for going through the evaluation review process? Next step from here, we want to transition over to the hangar side, the waiting list side. I know this may kind of stand out as odd, but at the end of the day, the hangar waiting list, it keeps coming up here, you know, and the mysterious hangar waiting list, we don't have a policy in place. So even though the guidelines, principles of agreement development and the process for evaluating leases apply to long-term leases, the hangar waiting list is really the first step in the short-term month-to-month agreements. And we felt it was necessary to lay out what's the policy. This policy is driven by a lack of a policy. I would tell you, I have been approached by people that say, hey, I came in 8 months ago. I want to know where I am on the list, and we couldn't find them. And I'm, you know, that was surprising. That has happened a couple of times. So, you know, a lot of times, you know, paperwork get lost, you know. I just believe that if you can establish a solid general policy with some procedures, some check and balances, you know, you come in there, you fill out an application, you know, that application is put in the system. Everybody's on board with that. That makes a world of difference. So that's what I attempted to accomplish here. Great. So waiting list process here. Applicant approach us, you know, they complete the form, return it to us. You know, the staff basically, you know, place them on the waiting list based upon the order in which it was received, first come, first serve. You know, the policy is set to where you don't have to necessarily own an aircraft coming in, but you will have to let us know that you're in the process of purchasing an aircraft. I think what we find nowadays more than ever, and Palatka is no different than most in the industry, folks get these facilities and don't use them for what they're supposed to be used for. And that's a major problem. Next step is, you know, you must be able to occupy that that facility within 30 days. If you can't, you lose your opportunity, because we have a list of people waiting, and we need to try to be as fair as possible with the process and not let someone hang on to the facilities. Okay, please. Okay. Yeah.
In West Florida, we ran into the idea a person can go buy a scrap airplane, and you know, they don't have them buying gas or anything else. So have you addressed that?
Yes. Actually, you know, the policy, the detailed policy is I believe a very good one, and it helps prevent some of those situations. You know, some people live in them, you know, and that's just unacceptable. And we have to be able to enforce that, because each month we should be going through doing fire extinguishers checks, and you know that there are protocols that help us to enforce it. And you know, the hangars are for aircraft, operating aircraft, not storage. Yep. So so notification. So, you know, again, we want to try to be fair. We want to try to be generous. You know, we're going to try to attempt to contact the applicant up to three times, saying, hey, you know, this facility is available. No response. You know, the emails, phone calls, you know, we're going to go to the next person on the list. I will tell you one thing that I noticed coming on board here was that the list existed. The list was long. The list dated back to 2019, maybe 2018. Realistically speaking, when you start calling people that's got on list in 2018, 2019, most of them are not around. You know, most of them are you know, they moved on. So, you know, we had to go through some kind of process of, okay, what's real here? You know, some people passed on. So, you know, this process is going to make it a little bit clear, and we kind of know what we're working with regarding our prospective tenants. But part of my interest and my commitment is to make sure no one is overlooked and make sure everything is fair. So next step is if we can't reach a potential tenant, you know, we want to go as far as, you know, sending out a certified letter. Because I will share with you, if I put my name on a list and I come back, I'm calling, I'm checking, you know, and you telling me I'm not on the list anymore, I would struggle with that. As an aircraft owner, I would fundamentally struggle with that. Certainly if you know, I know that I was included in the list. So we just want to be able to share with the prospective tenants, customers, that we do have a policy in place. And we want to follow that policy, and it doesn't create a problem for folks trying to get on board. So that was the spirit of establishing this particular policy here.
You know, if I could, I hear your concerns about having the aircraft in the hangar within 30 days of signing the lease. How is that going to be affected by your policy regarding repair of aircraft in a leased hangar? So right now, I don't think your lease rules allow major repairs of an aircraft within a T hangar, do they?
I don't recall seeing that they have the ability to do major. The commercial guys have the ability to do major work. Yeah.
I think that your
Microphone.
repairs in a T hangar are limited to
Microphone.
routine. I believe that your repairs within a T hangar are limited to routine maintenance type of things.
Correct.
You might even be able to do an annual inspection in them. I
Mhm.
don't recall off the top of my head. Are you able to? So I guess my question is, person buys an airplane and needs repairs. are you going to make provision for that within your 30-day time frame of putting an airplane in the hangar? In other words, if your airplane's in a commercial facility being repaired, but it's going to be out and available, are you going to be able to give them some leeway in that before they put the thing in the hangar?
Without a doubt, because I will look at that person as already being our customer. And if there was a extended service time, they still have their standing. Absolutely.
And if somebody were willing to buy one of the 2 airplanes that we've got out there in the derelict hangars and pay us for it after we get title, would you be willing to give them some priority in that hangar and keep in that hangar?
That's not a bad idea. If you purchase the aircraft,
A little incentivization.
you get you purchase the aircraft and you get
From
the
us.
facility. Yeah.
Okay.
I like that idea. Yes, sir.
You, in your experience at previous airports, did any of the previous airports you were at charge a registration fee for going on the list? I know we do not. And is that a practical thing?
Well, I think it's location. So we never did get to that point because we never had a high demand for T hangars. Typically, if someone's coming in for hangar development, they will come in for some larger operations and no one can necessarily compete. So we just kind of honored the first come, first served deal. There are airports in the state of Florida that are requiring deposits, non-refundable deposits. And I've seen $200 and I've seen $300 just to be on the list. So, if you're probably down south, that's hot. That's hot. If you probably actually a county or 2 over, you're going to find that the demand is probably like the real estate market was about 2-3 weeks ago. It was booming, and they have that ability to get $300 non-refundable deposits.
Well, I think it's reasonable to say that we do not have the ability to ever catch up with the demand here, because the only way we financially can build hangars is with grant money from FAA or the state or combination thereof. And we just cannot build them as fast as people coming in want to have hangars. Is that not a fact?
So we have 2 markets here. The T hangar market is.
That's what I'm speaking of specifically.
Yeah, T hangars are in high demand here. We people leave, we're not 100%, but we keep, it's turning over, we do leases every month or so, 1 or 2 people are leaving, people are downsizing. If you built 50, you'll probably fill 50 of T hangars here,
But that's not a practical thing.
No.
I mean, we're building what, 6 now, maybe?
We have 6 coming up. They mobilize in July. They should be in the year. Yeah, 6. Yeah.
At best,
Yeah.
best case.
But so the airport is a good spot, and it has an awesome opportunity. And the T hangars is just one aspect. The corporate hangars, I believe, is a really good opportunity if we can market it. You have to push it out there, and let folks know that, hey, listen, we have the land available. It's accessible to the runway, taxiway, travel areas, and that's our plan, to push it out there.
So Yul, are you done with your presentation and open for comments now? Or?
Yeah, we can go with the comments.
Okay, so I think as a board, our job, if I'm correct, Mr. Holmes, and you correct me if I'm wrong, please, is to evaluate this presentation of the guidelines. This isn't the policy, it's the guidelines to the policy, right?
Right.
And if we approve that, then we it can go to the city commission for their approval. And then every applicant will have a policy that'll be a different document. This is just the guidelines to that. Is that correct? Am I seeing that right?
Every applicant will have a policy. do you
Yeah, they'll have a separate applicant policy for their need. In other words, that's not something we approve. Right now, we're approving some guidelines.
I don't understand the separate policy.
Well, in other words, we would not approve Mr. Valencourt's application with these papers. These papers are setting the guidelines for Mr. Valencourt.
Oh, you're
to
saying they only
apply.
have a separate application?
Yes.
Okay. got it.
And a
And
lease.
that application will be totally based upon these guidelines, not the provisions that we're approving today in detail.
Right. I think my intent is, and what I would recommend to the city commission is that the guidelines would be a conceptual plan for us moving forward. I think you have to build in some flexibility in order for us to meet the challenges that are inherent in what we're doing out at the airport, and also take advantage of opportunities that may be presented. But hopefully, I look at this like I do a comprehensive plan in zoning. You have a comprehensive plan which sets up your goals and your basic tenets that you want to adhere to, and then your individual zoning applications and applications for special exceptions and so forth. They apply to the individual cases. Yeah, I mean, from that perspective, that's my understanding, and my intent actually in us moving these forward would be to have some platforms that are public, they're for dissemination. And then and I believe that what I've seen of the guidelines, they do allow for flexibility. So if you get that once in a generation or once in a decade opportunity to put somebody on the airport that's going to bring jobs and expand the operations of the airport into a different area, you still have the flexibility to do that without going back and totally wrecking the comprehensive plan or the lease policies.
So now we need to ask any other questions that we might have that might make this need to be altered or improved, right? So I had one comment on the performance bonds, and I hadn't even thought of that all these months that we've been talking about this process. But when we have a guy that's going to use his own funds to build his own with no debt, no liens, it probably is tremendously different than somebody that's going to go to the bank and borrow to build a $250,000 hangar. And there's going to be another party interested if he defaults outside of us just capturing it. So I guess that's where that performance bond would be very important.
Yes, sir. And as the city manager stated, so this is a guideline. I think it doesn't matter who the applicant may be. The recommendation is to follow the guideline, but in following the guideline, you have the flexibility, i.e. performance bond. You're right. You may have a scenario where it's like, hey, there's zero risk on the city. So the city is not going to require a performance bond for this particular tenant. But if there is risk, the suggestion is you may want to have something in place to where you can pull if you need to.
Right. So in other words, if a guy built a $250,000 hangar and defaulted and it was just all ours, then there's no risk. Really,
Correct.
we just get a $250,000 and
Right.
rent it out to somebody else.
Correct.
But if he owns a bank $500,000 on it, then we're in trouble.
We're in trouble. Or if we built that facility
Yeah.
and leased it to him, and he defaulted,
Yeah.
we're in trouble.
In trouble too. yeah.
So yeah, it's the bond. Some people call them bonds. Some people call it security deposits. It's to protect us.
So the attorney in me would simply add, performance bonds are not always easy to get,
Right.
and they're not cheap many
Right.
times. So I did note the fact that your clause as to performance bonds said may.
Yep.
Which rather than shall, which is a big deal to me. I think that having them on short-term rentals is just not a good idea, because I think it's gonna build a layer in there that I don't even know if you're gonna get banks willing to, or bonding, or insurance companies, or whomever willing to grant performance bonds on a short-term rental. And I don't know that I think it creates a bureaucracy you just don't need on a short-term rental. I think it's extremely important as you think about this, and before I lose track of it, that you subordinate the interest of any bank if possible. And you're going to have to kind of sort through that to see if it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
But to subordinate the interest of any bank that might be lending money for the construction of a structure on land that the city's going to retain, subordinate their interest to those of the lessor, which is us. And I throw that out there as an idea for you to keep in mind, because you don't want to build something in that's going to make it practically impossible for people to get financing. So if it turns out that's just not going to be possible, then so be it. But you need to understand that if they're interested in subordinated to ours, then obviously they have the ability to take precedence over our interest in certain aspects of the lessor lessee relationship. So the performance bond thing is, it's certainly something to consider. They're not the end all be all, at least my experience with performance bonds isn't. But they can sure be a help, but they are not cheap. That performance bond company, as you can imagine, insurance companies aren't in the business of losing money. So you get a performance bond, one, there's a premium, and two, if it's a significant performance bond, they want collateral. So, just FYI, I just want to make sure we understand that there are a lot of considerations in that performance bond thing, and we don't want to run somebody off with an absolute requirement that they post a performance bond in a given amount of the cost of the improvements or something like that. May not be, the trade-off may not be good.
That's right. Yes, sir.
So how do we move forward?
I think if I understand correct, we vote to approve these guidelines. And if we
I
approve,
so move.
okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, any further discussion?
I have some questions.
Yeah, let's do that.
So, yeah, and I hear what Don's saying about the performance bond, but I think my mind goes to the construction aspect of, if somebody's constructing something on our property, we want to make sure that the subs and the material men are paid. And so, maybe a payment and performance bond for the construction itself would be important. And I did note that while you had an indemnification clause, which I wholeheartedly support, we should also have insurances naming the city as additional insurance for operations and anything happening in the space. And so then on the policy on the waiting list, have you revised that waiting list? Have you called people who are no longer interested? I mean, how many people are on the list at this point?
I couldn't give you, Ms. Miller, a exact total. I will tell you, I'll give you ballpark. So last I read at 100, maybe 75 to 100. That's ballpark. So when I first got here, there were names on there from 2018, 2019. When we started going through the process of are these people still available, a lot of them came off the list. A lot of people got added on, coming by, calling in. But to be frank with you, there's no formal way of tracking that. Matter of fact, I can assure you it's not. What we're going to now is a better way to keep up with that, where folks have access to it. To be frank with you, once again, it was kind of like a mystery list. Well, you know, some airports have this list on their website, and you can sign up on their website. So the city manager shouldn't be thinking that there's a mystery list of facilities, you know, interested parties out there that want to do something with us. You know, he should be able to say, hey, send me over this month's list, and he'll see who's on there and how much it has moved. We don't have that. We're trying to clean that up in our candor.
Is it being used currently when you have a vacancy?
Yes, ma'am. We're working with what we got. And what I've communicated to the team members there is we're going to do the best we can. If another list pop up, we'll work through it, but you know, we're going to work with what we got, and let's go by and ensure that we go to the next person on the list. And we've been doing that. I think we've been pretty consistent. And some things are kind of tough to fix, I guess, when you don't have the history on it. But we're getting there.
Well, I certainly appreciate all of your hard work on this, and I guess I would just add that, you know, provisions, default provisions would also be very important, you know, how the city comes back in and takes possession and control and moves on to the next interested party. So I think those were my questions.
Mr. Chairman, I follow up with her, since just had a question generally on the waiting list. So what I heard you saying then, if you go on the waiting list now, you're going to get some kind of document.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Previously, you didn't get that.
Yeah. So have you thought about the people currently on the waiting list? Have they gotten some kind of document?
They have not received any kind of documentation yet. So the turnaround time, I think, is about 18 months to 2 years. You know, for if you're on the bottom, it's gonna take you a while to get there. Part of setting this up is to, at the very least, give them some kind of notification. And nowadays you can do it digitally with email or something. Hey, listen, just want to let you know, this is where you are. But we have to give them something. You know, some of these folks have been waiting for 12 months, and you come in and it's all you got is word of mouth.
So if you were to, for instance, require a deposit at whatever amount y'all establish, with the understanding that if, when your spot comes up, you take the hangar, you get the deposit back, or it transfers over to your lease deposit or whatever. If, on the other hand, when your spot comes up, you turn the hangar down because you've already got a hangar somewhere else, or you've sold your airplane or whatever,
right,
you lose the deposit. Would that be of any assistance to you in keeping your list clean? You know what I'm saying? Because you could end up with 400 people on that waiting list, and they already sold their airplane, quit flying, or moved on to other things,
right,
but they still got a slot. And if they don't have to post any, they don't have any skin in the game, they got no real incentive to call you when they decide they don't want to hang her any longer. I'm just saying, if you're
right,
if your whole goal is to keep your list viable, then you might want a little skin in the game for them. So if I really want to hang her, a couple $100 isn't a big deal. Hell, you pay almost that for spark plug now for an airplane. So if a couple $100 is a deal, and if I decide I'm not going to fly anymore 6 months from now, and I call you and say, take my name off the list, get my deposit back, cool. And on the other hand, if I get to my slot and you call me and I say, I don't want the hangar anymore, you know, not a whole lot of money, but you got $200 that he sacrificed. Is that an option?
Well, that's certainly an option. I don't think we're there yet because we have turnover in our T hangars. Believe it or not, since I've been here, we've had a number of people that just say, hey, you know.
How many are empty now?
You probably have a couple that we're working on leases for. It won't be empty too long. But you know, once someone leaves, somebody on that list is stepping up, going through the process of getting in place. So we have one or two that we are working on the lease agreements.
Just for the future on your report, your business report, can you just add an item there as to how many hangars you have vacant?
Occupancy?
Yeah,
absolutely.
thanks.
Speaking of that, we have 10 minutes left, and I don't want to rush this point, but we do have a business report if we want to do that. But Any other comments,
Yeah,
Mr.
just
McLean?
real quickly, and not to impede the approval of this policy, but I like what the city manager said, and please take that into consideration about the deposit, so they got skin in the game. Just
Okay.
take into
Yeah.
consideration.
Okay, are there any other comments? We don't want to cut anything short on thoughtful process. Well, we have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carried. Any against, opposed? Like sign, okay, all in favor, thank you. So congratulations, we've got a policy approved from
Thank you.
the advisory. board.
Congratulations, you.
Yes,
Appreciate
thank you,
your
sir.
work.
Very nice. And now we'll turn it over to you again, Yule, for a business report. You're unfortunately down to about 9 minutes.
Okay, I got you covered, Chair.
Thank you, sir.
All right, so, in general, we are continuing to show positive gain out there. I'm showing you 2 months, May as well as June. If you move over to avgas, May of this year, increased to $4,600.
What, can you back up there 1 second? I really appreciate you adding the gallons to your report.
Yeah.
Just want to mention that.
So, yes, it is. It's a different report.
Yep.
Now, can you tell us why we're selling less gas?
Well, in this day and time, activity doesn't necessarily mean, increase in dollars. What you're seeing here is less gas sold, but we are all over the rate.
I know you are.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not
We are.
I'm not being critical.
Yep, that's really what you're seeing, and which is really neat because it's helping us quite a bit.
And it's actually a compliment to you that you've moved less gallons of gas and your revenue's up.
All right, June, sales increased $15,600 over last year. And again, a lot of these things are driven by every week we are evaluating the retail rate that's being put out there, the industry rate. We're looking at the 50-mile radius. And, we are not trying to be the highest price, as I committed to you when I first came on board. If we can stay consistent with middle of the road, our prices would be just as competitive as the most. And I think what we're seeing here is that result. Some places have gone up to $10 at one point in time over the last few weeks or so. And that's tough. That's real tough. All right, moving on here, Jet A for May increased up to $24,800. Again, tracking, adjusting the prices.
Yule, can I ask a question, please?
Yes, sir.
So how much of that, would be Mr. Morris and how much would be Skydive Palatka? Would that be a large percentage of that, those two parties?
It would not.
It would not.
To be frank with you, there is a engineering firm out of Louisiana that has hit us quite a bit.
But is that Morris's engineering firm?
No.
No.
Yeah, it's tied to, I know certainly it's tied to a Georgia Pacific project going on. And they come in with 7 or 8 engineers and they prefer Palatka. They come in, they get the rental cars, they get over there, do their thing. There are some other projects going on around here in the region that they prefer to come into Palatka and go out. And again, these engineers, these are high-end IT professionals, 7 or 8 people, on these aircraft. Morris, since I've been here, it's only probably came through a couple times, if that, a few times. Skydive, there's only been one large operation that it was significant to probably make a move, on the gallons. But these are 1 or 2 jets, different companies coming in here frequently, and
In a lot of ways, that's better.
absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. So May here, increased $24,800 for Jet A. June, you go another little anomaly here. You increased by 7,000. But you also noticed that last year this time, you didn't sell a whole lot either. So again, you can look at different factors here, whether, whatever the case may be, but you see less amount, but more generated. And again, we have to stay sensitive to the price setting or rate setting. Hangars, miscellaneous tie downs, rentals, the 25,004 versus 24,9. For May and for June, 25 versus 28,4 for June 22. And total revenues. So for May, so 30,000 increase. And total revenues for June, so 26,000.
Can you scroll up, Sonny, so we can go to the next page? Total revenues, you said?
For May, it's 30,000. Okay. And for June is 26,000. Yes, sir.
I have a comment on the Avgas 100. I think we should all pay attention later this month and the beginning of next month, particularly at Oshkosh, because the 100 low lead, the 100 no lead is in a bit of disarray in the FAA dealing with the people that have been, quote, approved, unquote, over in Alabama to produce this. They had approval, then it got unapproved, and got approved again, and got unapproved. It got taken away by Washington from Dallas, and there's a real mess in the approval process to getting the no lead to replace low lead. Of course, I'm sure you're all aware that low lead is just compared to what we're using before, when it was really, really high lead. Several counties in California have come out and banned the low lead. So the California pilots are having trouble getting their aircraft fueled at many of the airports. Keep in mind that only about 30% of the airplanes out there require the high octane low lead, the 100 low lead. The other 70%, including both of mine, by the way, can just about get by on what you buy down the street for your outboard motor. But that's coming. It just hasn't come yet. So keep an eye on Oshkosh and what comes down there.
Thank you, sir. We have 1 minute left.
1 minute left. So moving on to the upcoming projects. As mentioned earlier, the 6-unit T-hanger project is coming up. And we're also working with the internal stakeholders and the grants, as well as our consultants on the fueling apron and the West Taxi Lane pavement rehabilitation, but on the surface area. I think that's more of a design project that's coming up. And what's the time?
It's really over, but keep going.
So before we wrap up, I want to just give you guys a heads up there that there's going to be a military training operation at the airport before we meet again, 15th and the 16th, I believe. It'll be in the wee hours of the morning. I guess this is an annual event for 28J. So they're going to have C-130, they're going to have H-60s, they're going to have Chinooks, supposed to have some Ospreys come in, And it's a joint operation, Air Force, Army. And our benefit, if things go well, is about 2,500 gallons
That's
of
wonderful.
jet fuel. So that they want us to fill their truck up
Are
with.
they gonna be landing and taking off or just coming in one time and then departing one time?
Yeah, just I think just coming in, you know, having everyone come in, you know, do their thing, hot feeling, you know, run their sessions and get out of there. So,
You shutting the airport down for that?
well, we're gonna issue the NOTAM. And it's probably better to shut it down because they want to set up at the approach of 9 coming down Taxiway Alpha area. Matter of fact, the C-130 is supposed to be sitting on Alpha. And it's gonna be that block of time, midnight to 2-3 o'clock in the morning. So we'll do a NOTAM, probably shutting the airport down for that block of time. But I've also connected with fire chief, police chief, because when folks see blackbirds and all that flying around, that time of morning, you know, folks may get a little uncomfortable. So, you know, so there may be some calls. So I'm sharing this with you now because we just got it, you know, their operations
You
plan.
gonna put out a press release on that?
They
And-
last time they did it. Last time they did.
Needs a press release.
If the military doesn't object to that.
Right.
It could save a few calls, you know, to the police and to the fire. And my question then is, on the press release, are you going to, I mean, the airport will still be, you're not gonna allow people out there on the ramp or anything like that, right?
You don't want a lot of visitors.
No.
I don't think they do, and I don't know
Actually,
that-
didn't last time they kind of made sure there was no visitors?
I don't know.
I believe they did.
Okay.
I'm sure they're capable.
Yeah, we'll certainly coordinate with,
Skydive Palatka man's post midnight jump or something, you never can tell.
or a wedding.
Or a wedding.
Yeah. All right, that's it.
Okay, well, thank you all very, very much, and we'll stand adjourned until next month. Thank you.
I just want to publicly thank you for the changes, not criticizing anybody from the past, but I think that definitely we're seeing progress at the airport.
I do an amen on that.